that Jesus was going to die. And this also tells us that Jesus was guaranteed to not get a fair trial. Because here you have this man who's supposed to be operating in what is right. He's doing wickedness. He's operating evil. So based on what he said, you already knew Jesus was not going to get a fair trial. And this just falls into the prediction of the Bible foretold concerning Jesus' fate. Any questions or comments? So it's interesting how what we got from studying the first chapter all the way up to this point. We've seen the progression in the life of Christ. And now we're at the point where we see the evil that is coming against him and how the same evil comes against the followers even to this very hour. Verse 15, and Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. That disciple was known unto the high priest, and went in with Jesus into the palace of the high priest. The phrase, and Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. So John is talking about himself. And when we looked at previous chapters, John often spoke in the third person. Now, why he did this, I don't know. This is the way the Spirit wanted him to kind of, describe himself in that manner. Maybe it was, just how they wrote concerning themselves, during that time. I'm not quite sure, but whatever the case, John is speaking of himself, and we know that it was John too, because not only did we look at it in previous chapters, but specifically when it got to the Last Supper, we knew that it was John based on the flow of the scripture that we read. So, and we can go back to John chapter 13, and even going forward to 19 and 21. Chapter 19, and 21, that we will see that again, he's speaking of himself in the third person. The phrase, that disciple was known to the high priest, and went in with Jesus into the palace of the high priest. So John, the Bible doesn't go into detail about it, but he somehow had access to the palace. So Ananias and John were acquainted with each other. Now, the Bible doesn't go into any specifics about it, but and it could be specifically that the Lord knew that he would need a true eyewitness in there. So it could be possible, and it most likely is the case, that the Lord orchestrated this relationship to be so in order that we can have a correct account, an eyewitness account of someone who was actually there in the trial. So John is here. He's gained access into the palace, and he's the one who's giving this first true eyewitness account of what happened. So it's just amazing how the Lord works things out. And he made sure that he could always have somebody there. And John the Beloved was the one that was chosen to be in sort of an acquaintance with this high priest guy. Verse 16, but Peter stood at the door without. Then went out that other disciple, which was known unto the high priest, and spoke unto her that kept the door, and brought in Peter. The phrase, but Peter stood at the door without, tells us that John had the permission to go in there initially, but Peter did not. But John is going to make sure that Peter gets in. And we're going to see that in the next coming verses. The phrase, then went out that other disciple, which was known unto the high priest, and spoke unto her that kept the door, and brought Peter in. So now John is able to speak to this woman that is by this door to let her know that this guy is with me, let him on in there. So now you have John and Peter both going into the place where the trial of Jesus is starting in infancy or in its beginning phases. Verse 17, then said the damsel that kept the door unto Peter, Are you not also one of this man's disciples? He said, I am not. The phrase, then said the damsel that kept the door unto Peter, tells us that this woman, and according to tradition, her name was Lydia. She noticed that Peter was a disciple of Christ. Now, the Bible doesn't tell us specifically her name, but when we say traditions, kind of passed down from church history, that this was this woman's name. So however the case it was, this woman recognized Peter as being one of the disciples of Jesus. It is also believed by theologians that when John was able to get Peter in there, he didn't keep walking with John, that he actually kind of just hung around for a little bit, probably because he was nervous and probably afraid of what was happening, and that he was pretty much hanging around long enough for this woman to take notice of and say, hey, you look like one of his disciples that's been walking with him the whole time. And so, so this woman recognizes him. The phrase, "Are you not also one of this man's disciples?" is the beginning stages of Peter beginning to deny him. So now Jesus has just got arrested. He's going before the high priest. And he knows that the high priest has the power to pretty much do whatever he wants. He's obviously afraid. He probably tried to sneak in there, but he probably was just hanging around just a little bit. This woman notices him. So now fear begins to grip this man. Because he's probably thinking like, oh, what they're getting ready to do to him, they're going to do to me. And so this also shows us that even though we profess that the Lord is our Savior and that we love him, given the right situation and the right pressure, we can forget the Lord just like Peter did. We can let fear grip us, we can let anxiety grip us, and cause us to essentially forget our Lord and our Master. So none of us are exempt from this. The phrase, "He said, I am not," again, is Peter lying about his association with Jesus. So this is the first denial. Jesus said he's going to deny him 3 times. So this right here is the beginning of the first one. Any questions so far? Verse 18. And the servants and officers stood there who had made a fire of coals, for it was cold, and they warmed themselves. And Peter stood with them and warmed himself. The phrase, "And the servants and officers stood there who had made a fire of coals, for it was cold." This tells us that it was cold outside. So during this time, it was extremely cold. In studying this, it also seems to lend itself that there is a spiritual aspect of it, because everything we see in Scripture always ties somewhere to some type of spiritual teaching and guidance for us. And so many theologians believe that this was also talking about the condition, the spiritual condition of not only Israel, but the people that were there. Because now they're in the palace, and generally, when you're hanging around in the palace and like in the temple and things of that nature, you pretty much behave the same way as like the priests and the ruling governors of Israel. So it's very well possible that these men themselves were spiritually lost, as we say, that they did not know the Lord. They didn't want to have any association with him. Whether or not that's truly the implication of this verse, is only speculation, but we can still glean from the fact that, when you don't know the Lord, you are essentially spiritually dead or spiritually cold. So either way, we know it was cold outside because they're outside and warming themselves. And that's why theologians say that it must lend itself to be some type of spiritual connection to it, because the Bible is specifically saying that it was cold outside. So either way, it was cold outside and they were warming themselves. The phrase, "and they warmed themselves, and Peter stood with them and warmed himself." So now Peter is standing next to these men as they're warming themselves, because even though they went into the palace gates or whatever, during that time, I believe, they still had openings to the sky, like in the courts area, where people would hang out, and if the area was open and you could see the sky at night, then you could get the elements, rain, the snow, and so forth and so on. So either way, they're standing out there. Peter is standing next to these men. He's trying to warm himself. And theologians also believe that these men represented the enemies of God. So Peter here, again, he's already nervous. He's already fearful. He's already anxious. He's trying not to be seen. So he's standing there. He's trying to look like he's just a common man. But as we're going to see, people are still going to notice him. So when we think about Peter's situation, again, we must always remember that Jesus Christ is supposed to be the object of our faith. So what does that mean? That simply means is that we look to him to lead and guide us in every aspect of our life. So no matter what it is that we're facing, we must rely upon Christ to see us through these things. We must believe that his power is sufficient enough for us to see us through whatever difficulties we face in life. The Lord is not ignorant of our human side. He knows that we are flesh. He knows that we are weak. But he also wants us to remember his words and rely upon him. And so Peter is just an example of how all of us have operated as Peter in some aspect of our life. When we stand next to folks we shouldn't be standing next to, we hang around folks we shouldn't be hanging around. That's something that's regardless.
when you think about Jesus telling Peter that you're going to deny me. You know, when he was saying that he was going, like he said, oh Lord, I surrender my all, you know, and use me. And then when something happened, it's like so much it's like, in a sense, we're denouncing God because we begin to worry about it, stress out about it, have anxiety about it. And when he told me, you're going to deny me 3 times, you know, and he already knew it. So with this, it tells me God already knows. Whatever it is that you're going to experience, whatever it is that you're going to go through. But we got to know that we serve a mighty God. Wherein that we don't have to get anxious or worry or fearful. But that's easy said and done because, you know, like you said earlier, you put the right pressure on, you know, somebody be like, okay, God, I know, but, you know, okay, I know you can, but, you know. So it goes to show you how the Lord had already told him before it even happened that it's going to happen. And then yet it still happened, and he still did what the Lord said he was going to do. But still, you know, he's still there. You know, he's still there for us. You know, so.
I think that Esther's kid had forgotten that he had said, oh no, I will not never deny you. But as soon as he did it the 3rd time, when he heard that whistle crow, he came right back, oh my God, he's in. And a lot of times that's what happens, you know, you'll call out and say something or do something, and then the consciousness hits you all. And you just feel so sad. You know, what I do now, you know.
I think it symbolizes our inability to really go to our spiritual self. Because even though he walked with Christ and he knew all this stuff, he still gave into his fleshly, his flesh to run away out of fear from Christ and abandon, you know, everything that he knew, he abandoned it because his flesh kicked in and he was afraid to stand with him. And that to me, it symbolizes what we struggle with every day. Because it's a lot of times think about when you're in a situation sometimes and you know as a Christian it's the right place to stand, say at work, right? Somebody's being bullied or mistreated by other people, but we sit there, we quiet, or we laugh with the in-group while this person is being mistreated and disrespected and lied on. But we should be standing up and say, hey, stop that. That's not, no, we can't do that. And we often have those spiritual struggles as Christians where we can't stand on the word or we don't stand up for the word.
The Bible also tells us that the flesh and the spirit are always at war with one another. So even though we're saved, we're filled with the Holy Ghost, we've been involved with the Christ, with this new creature, we still aren't perfect. But the difference is that we are not under the power of sin. Right? So in other words, like Pastor said, we don't wake up with our sin bucket list to just be hellish all day. We try to do what is right because we know that we are associated with God. But because we're not perfect, we will have those moments. And just like in Peter's case, the right pressure hit him. And like you said, Ms. Joy, he totally forgot everything that Jesus said. Because now he's faced with the reality, if I acknowledge that I am his disciple, that there's going to be evil that's going to come against me. Nobody likes any bad thing to happen to him. So when he starts to look at the situation and allow that situation to kind of dictate his thoughts, his emotions, then he starts to deny it. But like our response should be this. We should say, I'm going to stand up for Christ. I'm going to do what is right. But until a person actually matures enough in the faith, you're going to find yourself in these few moments. And this is going to be amazing as we're going to go on throughout the rest of this chapter. We're going to see him actually grow in his faith. He won't be afraid of what men may do to him. But at this stage, his faith needs to mature. And so until we grow with God, until we have this experience with him, our faith can mature, and then we'll find ourselves having these big moments like this. Verse 19, the high priest then asked Jesus of his disciples and of his doctrine. So now the Bible is switching to kind of show us what's going on with Jesus now. And the Bible is going this way to show us that everything that Christ said concerning Peter's denial is going to come to pass. So the Bible showed us first what was taking place with Peter, and now it's switching over to show us what is going on with Jesus. So the high priest then asked Jesus of his disciple is, this man was trying to figure out who was Jesus' disciples, and he most importantly was trying to figure out ways to accuse Jesus of a crime. So he was trying to find the evidence that he needed to crucify him. The phrase, and of his doctrine, is talking about whatever Jesus was teaching. So he's basically asking him, okay, who are your disciples and what were you teaching? So Jesus is now standing before this high priest. They took him there at night, which was against their Jewish law. So the Talmud, I don't know too much about it. What I do know is it's a collection of basically laws on how the Jewish people should live and operate. It goes into a lot more detail than that. But according to the Talmud, that it was illegal for you to do any type of criminal proceedings at night. So already they were breaking the quote-unquote laws that they were bounding themselves to by doing this. And they knew what they were doing. They knew by going at night, they were trying to push this all the way through to get him up to be crucified. So they were breaking their own laws, and the Talmud said that any criminal processes cannot happen at night. Nothing can be done at night, basically. And yet they were doing this. If a person was condemned to die, they should have done it properly during the day. It could have been done on the eve of the Sabbath. All of these things that they were saying that they were bounding themselves to, that they truly believed in, they were guilty of it. So they were guilty of breaking their own man-made rules, and they were guilty of breaking the law of Moses, which was God's rules. So either way, they broke both of their sets of rules by what they were doing in Christ. Verse 20. Jesus answered him, I spoke openly to the world. I never taught in the synagogue and in the temple where the Jews always resort, and in secret have I said nothing. So the phrase, Jesus answered him, I spoke openly to the world, is Jesus responding now to the high priest, and he's telling him everything that I said, I did openly. I didn't do anything in secret, and Jesus didn't. The only time you see him talking to his disciples outside of the open course is when they were asking him to further explain what he said. But when it came to his doctrinal things and everything he said concerning the kingdom, he spoke openly where every single person could hear him. So he didn't have any secrets, as they're trying to accuse him of. He didn't have any hidden motives. He said everything openly. And then privately, like the scripture said in some cases, then the disciples like, okay, what did you say when you spoke in front of all these folks? Tell us the true meaning of it. But initially, every person in Israel who had an ear to hear heard exactly what he said. The phrase, I never taught in the synagogue and in the temple where the Jews always resort. So he's saying that I came to the place where everybody hangs out. You hang out there, every citizen hang out there. I went exactly to your spot, and I preached. I said every word the Father told me to say. So you can't accuse me of saying things in secret. And so basically what the Lord was saying is, if you are stating that I preached and taught things that were wrong, why didn't you arrest me when I was in the synagogue? If I was speaking incorrectly, you should have arrested me then. You should have arrested me when I was in the temple, and you should have found me guilty. He said, but you didn't. So why now are you asking me this question? So this shows you the evil that is operating. This also shows you that this high priest was doing something he shouldn't have been doing, that he was operating in wickedness and evil. Because now he's trying to say that Christ was speaking incorrectly or saying things falsely. And then you're holding this proceeding at night, breaking your very laws that you say that you're upholding. So you're just doing evil all over the place. But yet you're still sitting as you are God representative. We see that this same type of behavior of this high priest continuing on today, where you got men and women who are claiming that they're holy, that they're righteous, that they're doing everything right, and they are operating in wickedness and evil, and they're still trying to sit in the place of God. They're trying to still sit in that holy position. claim that they're doing what is right when actually they're evil, their deeds are evil. And so this is the conversation they're having. And then the phrase that says, and in secret I have said nothing, which means once again, he didn't say anything that is hidden. He spoke openly to everyone. Any questions or comments? Verse 21, why ask you me? Ask them which heard me what I have said unto them. Behold, they know what I said. So the question, why ask you me? Jesus is now basically saying, why are you asking me this? You know without a shadow of a doubt that I spoke openly, because as the high priests were in the synagogue, they were in the temple. These men were there. These men heard every word that he said. So he's basically asking, now you're trying to stand up and act like you all holy and righteous and all of this. He's basically calling him a hypocrite. He said, you know exactly what I said. You know, I did not hold back anything at all. And then in the Gospel of Mark, they even tried to bring people in there to contradict and say, oh yeah, he was saying this and this and this, but the Bible made it be known that even though they started bringing in all these false witnesses, they couldn't even agree. So it's like, you got one man saying he said this, and another man saying he said this. It got to the point that it was like, this can't be true, because all y'all saying different things. You know, we can't believe it. So all in all, the evil was being exposed, and he was basically calling him basically a hypocrite. The next phrase, oh yeah, that's
I would say, you know, we know that these things had to take place for the cross. But the thing is, he was not a man that did any wrong, but those are the allegations they had to bring against him to crucify him. You know, but anybody that really knew him, like, you know, like somebody hanging out with you and somebody come and tell you something about me, you've been hanging out with me long enough, you should be able to say, no, that ain't her, that ain't, no, you can say this, but you can't say that, you know. And it goes to show you how they was with Christ in the synagogue. When you was in prison, you know, teaching and everything, nobody had nothing to say ill against him, but now all of a sudden I'm allowing you to get you. And you think about that's how Christians are faced with persecution today. That, you know, you try to live right, do the right thing, but when somebody want to really hurt you, they tell a story that you had nothing to do with, and you didn't tell it that way that they tell it. So it makes you understand what Christ went through.
because you got people now that somebody can accuse you of something, and the world we live in, they automatically crucify you. They automatically pass judgment on you. And like you said, that's what they were trying to do to him. They know for a fact that he wasn't saying these things, but they figured, well, we could just kind of throw out these false accusations. And everybody who was there would probably start to say, you know what? He probably did say that. You know, he probably was saying something crazy. You know, so that's just how evil works.
Yeah.
So whenever you aren't saved and you operate in the darkness, this is the type of thing that you want to do. You're going to try to find every way as you can to shut the good up, shut the light down, bring false accusations, because you want to destroy somebody's character, you want to destroy somebody's witness, and all of these things, because what they stand for shows that what you stand for is evil. It's in direct violation against God. And so that's why the Lord always told us that men love darkness rather than light, and the darkness will try to do whatever it can to shut down the light. And so they figure we get these false accusations. As the high priest, if I could just bring in these witnesses, people definitely going to believe the high priest. Even though if the high priest said, oh, Jesus was sleeping with women in the temple, and you know for a fact you ain't never seen him do it, but because the high priest said it, you probably would think like, oh, well, maybe he did it at a time that I wasn't at the temple, you know, because the high priest, he wouldn't lie to me, right?
Yeah.
He's the high priest. He's God's representative man to lead us in our religious affairs. So they were trying to use all the tactics that they possibly could to kind of discredit him. But that's what evil does.
Yeah.
They would try to do every deceitful, tactful way to shut down that which is good.
And I even just given the experience that I just actually recently had to deal with, and it really affected me. Where one of my office staff, she came to me about something. She wanted me to change a tab that was her assignment. She was going to do that. And because she was in college, she wanted to pass it on. So she stood up and she got all kind of irate with me. She said, that's all right, I'm finding other options. So, you know me, I said, okay, well, I'm sorry. And I'll keep on about my business. Then all of a sudden I got called in by the higher ups saying that they got word that I was yelling at people. I'm like, I said, that's not even my character. You know, anybody that knows me, I don't yell at people. And so at the time, I didn't know who it was. So when I called her in for something else, and I apologized because we had a meeting, I said, well, if I've been doing this meeting, I'm sorry, whatever. And she said, oh, since we talking, let's talk about you shoved some papers and you yelled at me. And I was like, huh? She said, yeah, you shoved some papers and you. I said, I didn't even give you the papers that I was holding. I said, I didn't even raise my voice. If anybody you raise your, oh my gosh, it's like she took the knife and stabbed me in my chest. And I got started having anxiety and I took off for 2 weeks. And I said, and while that period that I didn't get absolutely nothing. I just stayed home and I prayed and I said, God, help me with this. And the Holy Spirit revealed to me, she told you what she was going to do. She said she was going to find other options. I said, oh my gosh. I said, so she was trying to take and damage my character. And she told a lie. And she said and told me in my face. And I'm like, oh my gosh. That thing really did something to me. But when he revealed it to me, he said, she told you what she was going to do. She was going to find other options. I said, oh my gosh. So when I went back to work, and it got to be God in me, that I can really have a conversation, stop and speak, and don't have no animosity or anything, be revengeful. I just say, you know what, God, I thank you that I have a relationship with you. I say, because whatever the devil means for evil, you'll turn around for my good. And then I had to have a meeting with the high ups again, and they didn't know I knew who it was. And when I presented to them, I said, look, when I come to work, I get my all to do my job. I say, and for someone to go tell a story on me, because her husband worked there too, he used to be my boss. And I said, for somebody to tell a story, tell a lie on me, I said, that hurts me to my heart. I said, since we talking here, let's make it clear. I said, this is how I feel, and I don't mean this no truth. I said, I think she go home and vent to her husband, and then he comes and vent to all y'all. Because it was 2 of them in there, and the guy said, well, he hasn't said anything, but he did say he's staying out of it. Now I can say it, whoop, dead, because you just said it. But I didn't say that, I just said it, and I said, you know what, God, he's going to reveal the things that the devil try to bring to you. He's going to reveal them. But at the time, sometimes you'll be just thinking like, oh, okay, going on with business. But I said, she told me that she was going to do it.
And that's what people don't realize, that another human being will do something like that.
Yes.
I read an article today where the writer of this article was talking about the Chicago White Sox and Cubs game the other day. He was like, only 975 people attended out of 10,000 plus paid plus seats. So he was making it seem like the city of Chicago didn't care about the White Sox. But what he didn't reveal was that the reason why there was only 975 people there was that they changed the game from 7 o'clock at night to 1 o'clock.
And people were.
And it was snowing outside. And it was bad weather going on. He didn't tell people that, but he painted the picture like the whole city of Chicago don't like the White Sox because they're 5-7 and they had the lowest 28 attendance last year. They're just terrible. They just suck. But it's like, why would you write this article knowing good well that the reason why you only had 975 folks is because they upped the game 6 hours, bad weather outside. Half true. But then, people believe that type of stuff.
But, and I'll say this, and I haven't pontificated on this last week on Facebook, because I'm kind of angry. This is the thing that we as Christians never, to me, don't put into the equation. Everybody ain't for Christ. And we have to grip that and come to reality. Because now we have this mindset that we're going to save everybody and anybody. And a lot of people that we meet, they just ain't for Christ. And they'll never be. They'll always go against what the kingdom requires. They're not interested in it. So we run into those people. They are a test of our faith. We're not with them. They are a test for our faith. Do we fall away? Do we confront them in the manner that they do? You know, this lady's lying on you. You know that she ain't close to God.
Oh, I know.
It's two teams playing. So if you're doing something for the other team, guess who your boss is? And that's what we have to understand.
Yeah.
So, you know, for me, I used to think more, think everything had a gray area. And when I got saved, I realized it's two teams playing. You
Either black or white.
black and white. There ain't no gray area. There is no gray. You either live for God or you live for the devil.
And that's what I tell them. At work, I say at work, you talk about gray. Oh, they say about me, they say, oh, shit, don't have no gray areas. I say, you know why? Because there's policy and procedure. I say, if you go into gray areas, now you compromising the policy and the procedure. You give me the policy and procedure, I'm going to follow it to the T. You want to call it a gray area if you want to, I say that's where you get in trouble at. That's every time when you start going from the black and white to what you want. And I tell them, I say, I don't compromise policy and procedure because it's there for a purpose. And if you start compromising it, then somebody gonna get in trouble. And I ain't getting in trouble. And the whole reason why she lied on me is because she was falsifying documents and getting overtime that wasn't approved by me. So she had to get it cleaned up. So she try to make me look like, well, see, that's all right, because God turned that thing around. He turned it around.
And that's what he'll do. He'll reveal the truth.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
all these books that talk about Jesus, this Horus and the Egyptian, religion and all these. He didn't hold nothing in secret. But you want to stand up, you want to ask him what you talking
You
about.
can look at gay lifestyle, the gay agenda in the last 20 years. Every so-called report, every psychological evaluation that they put out to talk about that this is a genetic thing, okay, or it's something based on their mind and all of this stuff. All of those are written by people that push that agenda or people that are dealing with that lifestyle themselves. And you can't be born gay. There's just no, that's not how nurture way works. Okay? You are influenced greatly by your environment. There are environmental things that you are exposed to. None of us we are blank slates. Children, I studied child development a long time. We are blank slates primarily. We have some tendencies, but the dominating part of us is a blank slate. So the parents start writing on it, other people get to write on that slate and influence it, and then they start going down this thing.
Yeah.
If you tell a 3-year-old they're confused about their sexuality, then guess what? They're going to be confused about it because you told them to be.
Yep.
So, you say, well, you put on a dress, you put on a shoe, now, you got a little boy that's confused about gender. You taught him to be confused. And this is what happens a lot of times, and I've talked to men that are gay and dealing with that in treatment, and a lot of times you can trace that back to childhood where somebody made them aware of to act a different way or to pursue a different sexuality.
Persuasion, and that's what, and I'm saying my daughter actually it was influence. It was influence. I never had that lifestyle around her, and I never told her, and she was never molested, or raped, because I asked her, but because of influence, when you don't feel that void with something positive, somebody gonna come and bring something in, you're gonna fill it with something negative. And she's dealing with that now, and it's a struggle for her. And when she finally brought it out, I was hurt by the thing because I told her, I said, no, you ain't that's something you choosing to do. I don't care what nobody say, that's your choice. I say because you got involved with wrong people, and I know it was influenced because all of the people she started around it was through the person that she influenced her to do it. Because she didn't have no company, she didn't keep company except just that. So, now we're just praying for her because she's going from one struggle to another struggle, and her identity has been lost. So so now she's dealing with other things in life, and it's just, and I see it, and I pray for her because, and she's fighting the battle. She's fighting the battle because it's some is genetic on my side, her dad's side, plus the influence. So she got a lot of forces that she's dealing with. And I say my poor child has lost her identity and she don't know how to gain it back. So she's going from, different things and bouncing around, But like I say, she got to make a conscious decision. For God I live, for God I die. And he'll lead her. Yeah. Correct. That's it.
I never had a discussion with her about any of that. But I pray and ask the Lord to open their eyes, both of them's eyes of understanding, and let them know what is right. And this couple, they were living together in Georgia. And the other lady, she's very nice, very talented, got two daughters and a son and a grandbaby. And I'm like, I ain't gonna work, but my daughter, she said, well, your dad is moving to California. I'm like, what? She said, yeah, but she wants to pursue a career. But she works with one of the companies that do movies and whatever, and she wants to pursue and stuff. And she wants to really get involved in it. So, thank God, she's moved to California. And my niece is in Georgia. She's done it. Had to move out of the house, but they were in because they only retiring back to Georgia. But anyway, but now they're separated, and I'm like, thank you, Jesus. So now that they're apart, he can speak to the two of them, and they're not just right there where they constantly impact,
Yeah, that's just gotta pray that God still stays in the midst and reveal what is true and what is evil. So we just see it wrapped up all in this particular text. Verse 22. And when he had thus spoken, one of the officers which stood by struck Jesus with the palm of his hand, saying, "Answer you the high priest so?" So the phrase, "and when he had thus spoken," tells us that he had previously just spoken to the high priest. He answered his question. The phrase, "one of the officers which stood by struck Jesus with the palm of his hand." It's believed by theologians that the reason why he did this was because he was trying to gain favor with the high priest. Either way, again, this shows evil in operation. This shows hatred for Jesus Christ, what is good. Because you asked me a question and I answered your question. He didn't say it in like a condescending manner or anything like that. He just gave him a direct answer. But again, we see that whenever somebody has not accepted Jesus Christ, they will hate him without a cause, just like the scripture said. The question saying, "Answer you the high priest so," tells us that they were just looking for a reason to do evil onto Jesus. So what Jesus said to the high priest and openly in front of everybody, it did not warrant this type of aggression against him. Because we know the way that Jesus spoke, he didn't speak in any hostile type of tone. He spoke plainly, openly, where they could understand him. So this act that was done against him there was no cause for it at all. And this man, the high priest, who was supposed to be a type of Christ, again shows us that this man was wicked and he was evil, and really he shouldn't have had the position as a high priest. Verse 23, Jesus answered him, "If I have spoken evil, bear witness of the evil. But if well, why do you hit me?" So the phrase, Jesus answered him, means that now he's looking directly at the officer that hit him. The phrase, "If I have spoken evil, bear witness of that evil." So what he was saying is, if I have said something, tell me what I said that warrants you to do this evil unto me. If you said I lied, tell me what the lie was. Tell me exactly what I did. If I've done any evil, you must tell me. The question, "But if well, why did you hit me, or why smite you me?" So what he was saying is, if I have not said anything that was evil, why did you hit me? What was the cause of me doing this evil? And when you sit down and you think about everyone who doesn't know Christ, when they do the evil against somebody who stands for Christ, when you ask them specifically, what did I do to warrant you to hit me or try to persecute me or try to kill me? And the only thing that they can ever come back was that you stood for Jesus Christ. So you tell me because I stand for something that is good, for something that is right, that gives you a license to beat on me, to hit me. So we have all of this scenario unfold to show us that in this world that we live in right now, the majority of the people in this world hate Jesus Christ simply because of who he is and what he stands for. The Way of the Master folks, Ray, I forgot his last name. Whenever he goes out, he talks to people, and he tells them, why do you hate the Bible? Why do you hate Christianity? It always goes back to, because it exposes my evil deeds. It comes against that which I want to do. So in their mind, they want to shut down any and everybody who stands for that. We were talking about this at work, about how, people come against believers. Because one of my coworkers, he was asking me a question. He was like, have you ever been challenged? I said, yeah. I said, when we did street ministry, I was definitely challenged. I had people curse God in my face. I had people try to come up and try to basically, debate me in the scripture. I said, I've seen it all pretty much on the streets. And he was like, well, this one guy, I remember on my college campus, he was faced with that same scenario. He was trying to figure out, why does that happen? And so I basically told him, when you are in darkness, and I kind of use a different word because I know you don't understand it, but I basically said that when you don't want to accept Jesus Christ, you will try to shut down and silence anybody that stands for him. Because what he stands for is always going to expose you. People don't like to be exposed. I said, so when this guy on your college campus was coming to this preacher boy, and the whole conversation went like this, well, the Bible says that if you get bit by a snake, you won't die. But I guarantee you, if a Christian get bit by a snake, he won't die. So the atheist argument was, see, what you're even talking about, you don't even believe. And I was telling my coworker, I said, in that type of situation, you got to realize who you're dealing with, who you're working with. You got to realize what's operating through the individual. And I said, at that point in time, you don't start to debate the word. You just simply just go to your separation and leave it at that. And so this is what evil does. And so we have to be aware that as we stand for Christ, as we stand for righteousness, the majority of the people that's in this world are going to hate us simply because of what Jesus Christ stands for. So when we talk about persecution, as a believer, you got to get ready for the persecution. Just like when we were praying tonight, like I said, it's just been in my heart that the church needs to awaken itself to what is really going on. Because there is a great evil in this world. The deception is growing stronger and stronger. The hatred towards Christ is growing stronger and stronger. We've already seen it overseas, but it's coming over. It's over here in our shores. It's in America. It's in the quote-unquote West, that the world calls it. It's here. It's going to intensify. It's going to continue to grow. So this is why it's very important that believers truly know who they are in Jesus Christ, truly make a stand for him, and realize that the evil and the animosity is here. Jesus said it best. Don't marvel at the fact that they hate you. Remember, they hated me first. So because they hated me first, who I stand for, they're going to hate you. That's why this guy was hitting them. What had anything to do with what he said. It was simply because of who he is, what he represented. And so that's the thing that we have to take a look at. Well, we're going to stop right there. We'll pick up next week on verse 24. So, what we learned tonight, we talked about how the behavior of those who don't know the Lord operate, how people can tell lies and they can manipulate things and try to shut you down and try to destroy your character. You will see the animosity come against you simply because of who you stand for and what Christ stands for. And we see the evil that is flowing in these men. And we also saw how, given the right pressure and the right situation, we will be just like Peter, denying him, saying that we don't know him and don't have never had any association with him. So we have to learn as Christians to grow and mature in our faith. And how we grow and how we mature in our faith comes through studying his word. It comes through prayer. It comes through just experiences that we're going to have, but we must learn and we must grow from these experiences. So it's very important that all believers really, have a consistent prayer life, really study in their word, really seek the face of God to grow in Him. And when we hear words like in Bible study and when we hear the preaching, that we really allow those words to connect with our very soul. That, we just don't be like, oh, that sounded good, that was really nice. But what we hear, it should become one of us. We should become one with the word that we hear. Because if we don't, then we'll hear it, but it won't take any root, and we'll just continue going on. And then when the pressure hits, we'll fail. We'll do just like Peter. But we also have to realize when we fail, we must get back up. We must continue to press forward. We cannot allow the enemy to continue to speak into our ear. So all in all of this is a growing process that every believer must take seriously. We must grow in the Word. We must stay strong. We must stay connected to Him. We must always have Him as the object of our faith. It simply means that when we wake up, we declare that the Lord is our Savior. When we say that He is our rock, we're saying that the Lord, you are my foundation that I stand upon today. I don't know what it is I'm going to face, but I pray that you will be with me, that you will help me, that you will, light up my path before me. I'm trusting in you that whatever situation I face today, and if I just so happen to stumble and fall, just like you prayed for Peter, also pray for me, also lift me up. So we just have to be aware of, when we start our day, be aware of who we connect to, what we're going to face, and just allow Him to lead and to guide us. One of my prayers that I always say, most of the time that when I'm driving to work is, Lord, I declare your peace. I declare that you are righteous. I don't know what I'm facing today. I know I'm going to have some issues at work, but Lord, help me to see the issues when they're confronted before me. Help me to not haul off and say something crazy or allow certain attitudes to affect me to where I get tired or I get angry or I get stressed out. I'm asking the Lord to help me because I don't know what I'm going to face. I don't know what I'm going to come against that day. And that's what we have to be like. And so we see that this would happen to Peter, but we can learn from this that we can't be so high-minded to think that this won't happen to us because it can if we don't keep ourselves guarded in the right position. So that's our study tonight. Any additional questions or comments?